The new double tap augment Double or Nothing gives you a 15% chance of doubling your damage, but also gives you a 5% chance of doing no damage. On the other hand, double time gives you an insane 44% increase in your rate of fire. So which one is better? Which one should you choose in what situations? And which one is going to maximize your damage per second? I know I just did a huge long video about double tap. By the way, thank you all so much for the support of that video. That took such a long amount of time, and I'm so happy you all love it as much as I love testing it. However, there are a couple minor things that I mistakenly got wrong. Don't worry, it doesn't affect too much, but really I feel after editing it and looking back on it, I did not give enough emphasis on Double or Nothing versus that double time rapid fire effect. And I know in the heat of the moment during a video, there's a lot of numbers I'm trying to give out and a lot of information that I'm trying to portray. I know it can get confusing, so I wanted to kind of take my time and explain to you these two minor augments because I think they're the most significant augments of double tap. So let's start with some things that I got wrong. First of all, Double or Nothing plus double impact. This chart is a hypothetical damage increase with Double or Nothing, double impact, and both. In this hypothetical, our base damage is 1,000 and that's just it. It's a made up weapon. And so Double or Nothing, we've got 15 instances of double damage and 5 instances of 0 damage because it's out of 100 shots. So 15% of doubling our damage, 5% chance of 0 damage. That makes sense. And that got us a 10% increase overall to our damage. And double impact, having every other bullet deal 1.5 damage, which is what we said, averages out to about a 25% increase. But where I went wrong is combining them both here. I believe I got a number of 1350, which is this plus that, and that is actually wrong. I made a mistake when hypothetically adding in these numbers together, and I can show you better on this different spreadsheet that I made. So as you can see, I recreated this example, and on the right here, we expect 80% of our shots to be regular, we expect 15 of our shots to be multiplied by 2, and then we expect 5% of our shots to be 0. I had made the mistake of going into this hypothetical and I doubled 15 of these, so I had 15 of these double effects. But then when I added in the zeros, for example, as you can see, this count right here, I have 4 zeros here, but I'm going to add in a 0. I'm going to add one in to this doubled number already, and you can see that took away from the doubled number. And if I do that, yes, I'll get the right amount of zeros, but I accidentally took away the amount of doubles that I needed. If that doesn't make sense, just know that I only had 13 of this double damage as opposed to the 15 that we expected. And so with this more accurate damage representation, you're actually going to get a 37.5 increase in damage with both double impact and Double or Nothing, which I have corrected on the main spreadsheet. However, this is again where I didn't necessarily make a mistake, but I think I misrepresented this damage increase, specifically when comparing it to this 81% increase with double impact and double times rate of fire increase. Because what many of you pointed out, by the way, thank you all for pointing out all of these little details. These little details are important. A lot of you pointed out, Donuts, you're taking into effect this rate of fire increase as well as the damage increase, whereas over here, this is just the damage increase, which you are absolutely correct. You are getting this damage increase with double impact and Double or Nothing, but I forgot to calculate into this the base double tap rate of fire increase. And so what I did was I took this chart and I decided to make it even bigger and better. Now, I don't have many graphs, but I think these charts are really fascinating. So if you don't know, on the left here, we have the damage dealt with all of these augments and whatever configuration that we have. Up here, we have the rate of fire of all of these things. So we have the base rate of fire, we have the base double tap rate of fire, and then we have the double time minor augment rate of fire. Important to note, double impact is averaged to be 25% because that's our hypothetical. Of course, with all of these hypotheticals, they are the ideal. You're hitting every single shot. You're hitting every single shot. That's a critical shot. You're never missing. You never need to reload, all that sort of good stuff. But now I added this Double or Nothing and double impact, which this is dealing 1.375, which is the damage increase that we just calculated right here. And now we can really compare what the best damage per second augment setup is going to be in Black Ops 6, at least with double tap. Now you might be wondering why all of these things are impossible, and that's because these 3 damages are double tap augments, meaning you're always going to have at least base double tap. You cannot not have double tap and have the augments on at the same time, so hopefully that makes sense. And then the other thing is just like with double or nothing, you can't have double time and double or nothing. So if you're going to have double or nothing, you're sacrificing that rate of fire, which is making this combination impossible. However, if you can read, you understand why this is so important, and you'll understand kind of how big of a deal it is that I missed talking about this. I did mention it, and I did cover the fact that double time increases the rate of fire and double or nothing increases the damage potential, but Treyarch did a phenomenal job at balancing how close these things are. Let's pretend you have one class with double or nothing and double impact, so that's the increase in damage, which is going to get you this square, this damage per second, so 116,000, and then if you wanted to do double impact and double time as another augment setup, that's going to be this square, which is 119,000 damage per second, which is pretty darn close. And even if you forego double impact, if you run double or nothing and you want to do like double standard with like a shotgun or something, you'll still get the base double tap increase of rate of fire, so you'll get 93,000 damage per second. But then if you did want to run the double time augment, again with like maybe double standard or something, or double jeopardy, you would then have 95,000 damage per second, which is again really close to this other augment setup, which is very important. And every single stat is very close. The time to kill is very close. The kills per second is very close. Even up against special and elite enemies with the vulnerability augments, obviously, you're dealing 209 and 204 damage per second. And when you get down to it, the time to kill, you're killing the elite enemy in under 5 seconds either way. Again, ideally if you're hitting all of your shots and whatever. And this is the point that I really wanted to make. Here is the percent increase of all of these augments. Obviously our base is 0%, that's our base. With the regular double tap rate of fire, we're getting, in this situation, it's a 28.95% increase. That's just with the rate of fire. Usually that's going to be closer to 26, like we said in the video, and that's going to be closer to 44, but the proportions are right. Even if these numbers are a little bit higher than they should be, the proportion of the base to the double time and all of the damage numbers are at least proportionally correct. So you could see here with double or nothing and the base rate of fire, 41%. If you took off double or nothing, you put on double time, there you go, there's that 45%. Again, very close. You put on double impact, double time, 81%. That is statistically the best damage per second. But if that recoil was too much for you, if you're missing your shots with that double time, then putting on double or nothing and double impact is still going to get you the second best damage per second out there. And it's really close. It's 4% of a difference in this example. And that's because when we calculate damage per second, we're calculating the amount of damage we deal over time. So with double impact and double or nothing, we're dealing a higher amount of damage, but we don't have the rate of fire, so it's over a longer period of time. So that's what this represents here. We're dealing more damage over a longer period of time, as opposed to over here where we have double time, which is going to get us a rate of fire increase, and double impact, which gets us that little bit of damage too. It's not as much damage, but we're dealing that damage way faster. So these two numbers, which I just completely made up, they are the same damage per second, but they are just handled in a very different way. And this is not insignificant. As I said in that double tap video, there are some weapons that are insanely difficult to control their recoil. And so with that double time augment, I don't care how fast you fire, if you're not hitting your shots, you're not dealing damage. So you might want to put on double or nothing and get that extra damage. And if this point wasn't clear enough, I did something that I really like here. I graphed out each of these situations back here. So with the double or nothing, you can kind of see the randomness. We have that base 1,000 damage that we're dealing in this hypothetical. And occasionally we'll deal 2,000 damage. Occasionally we'll deal 0 damage. Here's 2 times damage, 0, you know, it's very sporadic. But with this double impact, which is a major augment and that's a minor augment, obviously this is going to have a bigger effect on the perk and everything. But this double impact, as we could see, is going to have a much higher average amount of damage because every other shot ideally is landing and dealing that extra 150 damage. So even though this minor augment is dealing more damage, quote unquote, at a time with this bullet, with that bullet, over a period of time, the double impact is going to serve you better. And then when you put them together, this is the graph you get. In fact, let's zoom out here a little bit. You can see the double impact, the consistent right here. So you're naturally getting that elevated damage. And if you elected not to have the double or nothing, that would just mean that you're dealing this amount of damage faster. But if you have double or nothing, as we can see in this graph, sometimes you might deal 3,000 damage. Sometimes you might deal 0 damage. Sometimes your regular damage will be doubled to 2,000. Sometimes your extra 1.5 damage will be doubled to 300% or 3,000 damage. Again, hypothetical mystical gun that doesn't exist. But for certain weapon categories, like shotguns, especially snipers, even some pistols maybe, you might want to have the chance to deal this huge amount of damage. And to give you a more practical example, as we figured out with the kilo here, this is 4,000 damage. That's just base critical damage that it can do. So if we put that 4,000 damage here, and this is double impact and double or nothing as a reminder, that means a lot of the time we're going to be dealing that 6,000 damage, or it's actually 7,000 damage. That's a little bit more accurate, but occasionally we'll deal that 300% damage, which that's at least 12,000 or 13,000 damage in one bullet, very occasionally, 15% of the time. And so when we go to our zombie stats here, remember 13,000 damage at the very least. If we look at where 13,000 health is, that is all the way down here to around 32 or 33. That is insane. Now, how often is that happening? Well, if you're perfect, if you're a machine, if you don't miss, you're going to have 7.5% be doubled here. So 7.5% of the time, you're going to be dealing, what is that, 9,600 damage, which is enough to insta-kill in the late 20s. But then another 7.5% of the time, you're going to be dealing at least 13, maybe even 14,000 damage. Let's just do some quick math here. Yeah, 14,000 damage, 14,400 damage. That is enough to insta-kill a zombie at round 33 if they have no armor, if you got lucky with a critical shot. All of that to say, I know I kind of emphasized double time as that rate of fire increase, and I showed this graph and it was like, oh my goodness, 80% versus, whatever, 35% it was way over here. I felt like that was misrepresenting the actual damage stats and the actual DPS of these two augments. And hopefully I provided you a pretty practical example of how even a normal bullet weapon can benefit occasionally from this double or nothing slash the double impact augments. And so really this might not even come down to like a weapon category thing, even though some weapon categories do lend itself to, this sort of special augment combination, which is so fun. It might come down to your personal preference. If you are somebody who wants to have the chance of dealing all of this damage, even if it's like 7% of the time, it might be worth it to have this a little bit less technical damage per second just to have the actual damage dealt. This is why this perk is so darn fun. And so I'm going to add this spreadsheet to the other spreadsheet so you can just use the link in the description to download this spreadsheet and have fun with all these numbers yourself. And if you haven't already seen the full double tap perk breakdown, what are you doing? It's amazing. Go check out the full video right here. And as always, stay beautiful.